Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. It began with the sound of tires crackling over gravel, slow, deliberate, each turn of the wheel marking the start of something unknown. The car's headlights cut through the mist, casting thin beams that danced along the narrow path leading into the forgotten village of Wren Hollow. Julian Mercer sat stiffly behind the wheel. The clock on the dashboard blinked 11:47 p.m. The radio was silent, save for a low static hum he hadn't managed to turn off. He didn't remember when he'd last passed another vehicle. Or when he'd last seen a gas station. Or a person. The invitation had come in a weathered envelope, hand-addressed in spidery ink, with no return address. It simply read, "Come to Wren Hollow. The house has been waiting." He hadn't planned to go. But here he was. Compelled by a curiosity he couldn't explain. The trees lining the road were unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed absent. Shadows stretched long and crooked, spilling across the road like fingers reaching for his tires. When he finally pulled up to the house, an old manor clawing at the edge of the woods, something in him tightened. Its windows were dark, its roof sagging. Ivy crawled up the stone like veins. Yet the porch light flickered on as he approached, triggered not by a motion sensor but, it seemed, by his presence. The door creaked open before he knocked. Julian stood still, the hairs on his neck rising. "Hello?" he called softly, but no voice answered. The air inside was colder than outside. Dust hung in the air, shimmering in the weak light of the entry hall. The floor groaned beneath his boots. The smell was faint but noticeable, old paper, rotted wood, and something metallic. He found a letter waiting on a table by the stairs. Another note. "The rooms are ready. You must not leave before the third night. That is the rule." Who had written these? And why was he following their summons? More strange things began to unfold that night. He would hear breathing in the next room when no one was there. The mirrors all seemed slightly fogged, though the glass was clean. Sometimes, he'd turn to look behind him, certain he'd seen something move, but nothing was there. When he first tried to leave the house the next morning, the front door simply wouldn't open. It wasn't locked. It wasn't jammed. It was as if the house itself refused. Julian began to understand that this place, this Wren Hollow, was not somewhere one visited. It was somewhere one was taken. Julian tried the door 3 more times that morning. The handle turned, but nothing gave way. The hinges didn't budge. It was as though the wood had fused with the frame, part of the structure itself. He banged against it, even shouted once. The echo felt swallowed, muted, as though the house didn't like the noise. He turned slowly and looked back into the foyer. It was colder now. The thermostat still worked, it blinked 67 degrees Fahrenheit, but he could see his breath misting in the morning air. The windows were covered with a thin layer of frost despite the June weather. Outside, fog still clung to the trees like spiderwebs. Julian's phone had no signal. No Wi-Fi. No bars. The battery percentage had dropped strangely fast overnight, even though he hadn't used it. He tried calling 911 just in case. The screen flashed call failed again and again. Still, he refused to panic. He wandered the house for a while, exploring slowly, carefully, like the place might wake up if he stepped too hard. The architecture was bizarre, an odd mix of Victorian and Gothic revival, with impossibly long hallways and sharp, high archways that didn't seem right for the footprint of the house. The interior was dim but not quite dark, lit by a strange gray light that didn't seem to come from any source in particular. The rooms were filled with old furniture, intact, but clearly untouched for decades. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, yet the air didn't smell stale. That metallic scent lingered. Like iron. Or blood. In the parlor, he found an old gramophone, still wound, a needle resting on a dusty shellac disc. On impulse, he turned the crank and dropped the needle. What came out wasn't music. It was whispering. Soft. Indistinct. Like a dozen people murmuring through walls made of water. He snapped the needle back, but the sound continued for a moment, echoing after the gramophone had gone still. He left the room quickly. That afternoon, he discovered the attic. The door was narrow and hidden behind an old tapestry on the third floor. He hadn't noticed it at first, but the draft had lifted a corner of the fabric just enough to reveal the brass handle. It was unusually cold to the touch, even colder than the rest of the house. He had to brace his shoulder against the door to get it open. It stuck as though something pressed from the other side. The attic smelled of cedar and damp earth. Strange combination. Inside were dozens of trunks. Old traveling cases, leather-bound and marked with initials in faded paint. None of them his. Most were locked or sealed shut with what looked like wax. Some had rotted open. He didn't open many. Not after the first. That one was filled with dolls. Porcelain, cracked, eyeless. Their heads turned at odd angles, their limbs bundled like bones in linen. He closed the lid slowly and left them alone. But something odd happened as he turned to leave. He felt it in his spine before he even heard it, the soft click of the door shutting behind him. It hadn't been windy. There was no draft. But the attic door was now closed. And when he tried to open it again, it resisted. Not stuck this time, held. Like something had pressed against the other side, matching his strength for strength. Eventually, after a long pause, the pressure gave. The door creaked open. No one was there. But Julian could swear the dolls had moved. They sat differently now. One of them was facing the door. That night, he didn't sleep. Not well. The bed was too soft. The sheets smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. He kept the lamp on, but it flickered constantly, buzzing like an old wasp trapped in glass. Sometime past midnight, he heard footsteps above him. Not creaking beams. Not the settling of old wood. These were distinct. Heavy. Measured. Like someone pacing in the attic. Then a dragging sound. Something long. Slow. Like fingernails or cloth across the boards. He didn't go up to check. When he finally drifted into shallow sleep, his dreams were filled with indistinct voices calling his name from behind walls. He saw corridors that twisted like intestines. Faces that blinked without eyes. The house breathing. Slowly. The walls expanding and contracting. And then, a lullaby. Soft and distant. Hummed from a room he couldn't find. The next morning, Julian found something written on the bathroom mirror. The steam hadn't fully cleared, but through the foggy glass he could make out the words etched faintly into the surface, 2 more nights. He hadn't written it. He hadn't even used the shower yet. And when he wiped the mirror clean to check if it was just moisture tricking his mind, the message was gone. But the letters had been there. He knew it. And as he stared at his own reflection, pale, bloodshot, drawn thin, he thought he saw something else behind him. A shadow. Just behind his shoulder. But when he turned, nothing was there. The rest of the day passed like something broken. Time felt stretched, as if the house existed on the edge of somewhere not quite real. The clocks still ticked, but none agreed. The one in the kitchen said 11:42. The one in the hall said 2:27. His watch stopped moving entirely. There was food in the pantry. Canned goods. Vacuum-packed meals. All labeled with strange brands he didn't recognize. One can was marked, lamb, salted, 1952. He didn't eat it. Instead, he found bread that hadn't molded, and tea leaves sealed in a glass jar with a red wax stamp. The tea was bitter and sharp, but it kept him grounded. He spent most of the afternoon in the library. It was massive, larger than seemed possible given the exterior of the house. Books lined the walls floor to ceiling. Many were unmarked. Some were in Latin. A few had no text at all, just ink drawings of bones, twisted roots, empty stairwells. He opened one that had a voice. Not literally, but the instant he turned the page, a whisper rushed past his ear. "Go back." He dropped the book. It closed itself. When he looked around, every other book on the shelves had turned ever so slightly in his direction. By dusk, he heard it again. The lullaby. Closer now. Still faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice, humming through the walls in slow, rocking cadence. It made his bones ache. He followed the sound through the house, up 2 staircases, past the drawing room, and into a hallway he didn't remember being there the day before. At the end of it stood a single door. Black, with no handle. The humming stopped the moment he reached it. He stood there a long time, listening to his own breath, the silence behind the wood, the ticking of a watch that no longer worked. Then, from behind the door, a soft knock. Not frantic. Not aggressive. Just one. Single. Knock. Julian ran. He didn't know why. He wasn't the kind of person who ran from anything. But something primal took over, his legs moved, his chest pounded, the house shifted behind him. The hallway seemed longer now, the corners less familiar. He could feel the walls watching. Listening. When he finally stopped, he was back in the entry hall. The front door still wouldn't open. And on the inside of the window, where condensation had begun to form, he saw a set of fingerprints. Not his own. Too small. Like those of a child. Julian awoke in the library. He didn't remember falling asleep. His last memory was standing in the entry hall, staring at those small fingerprints on the glass. He must have wandered. Drifted. The house had a way of rearranging his steps when he wasn't paying attention. The old leather armchair beneath him groaned as he shifted. A book lay open in his lap. Not one he remembered choosing. There were no words on its pages, only drawings. They were of rooms. The same rooms he'd seen in the house. The library. The parlor. The winding staircase. But in each sketch, something was wrong. Shadows that shouldn't be there. A face peering from a corner. A door that had never been opened before. And on the last page, a crude charcoal sketch of a man sitting in a chair in the library, a book open on his lap. His mouth was open, like he was screaming. Julian snapped the book shut and set it aside. The second night had begun, though the light outside barely changed. The sun had not fully risen that day, nor did it now truly set. Instead, the woods outside remained suspended in a sickly twilight. Fog bled into the windows like ink in water. The silence of Wren Hollow pressed on the walls. Julian decided to explore again. Not out of curiosity now, but necessity. He needed answers. A way out. Or at least an understanding of what this place was. He returned to the second-floor hallway, where he'd found the black door the night before. But it was no longer there. In its place stood a wall of bookcases, flush with the others. Seamless. As if the hallway had always ended that way. But as he pressed his hand against the books, he felt warmth. Not the kind of mechanical heat from radiators or vents, but body heat. Like someone was standing just beyond the wall, breathing softly. He whispered, "Who's there?" And from behind the wood, faint and distant, he heard the voice of a child say, "Please don't leave me here." He staggered back. The voice hadn't sounded threatening. If anything, it was frightened. Desperate. But it couldn't be real. There were no children here. He was alone. Wasn't he? In the hours that followed, the house began to change. Subtle at first. A painting on the wall was now upside down. A lamp in the study flickered even though it had no bulb. The grand chandelier above the dining table swung slowly back and forth, though there was no draft, no movement in the air. In the kitchen, he discovered footprints in the dust. Small ones. Bare. Leading from the pantry to the cellar door. The cellar door had not been opened before. But now, it stood ajar. Just an inch. Just enough to be noticed. Julian hesitated, one hand on the edge of the door, listening. There was no sound. No creak of stairs. No breath. Just a deep, humid cold that wafted up from the dark. He descended slowly. The stairs groaned under his weight, as though they hadn't been used in years. The light from his phone, now at 9% battery, barely pierced the darkness. The basement was vast. Too vast. Bigger than the foundation should have allowed. And the air smelled damp and heavy. Like soil. And old things buried beneath it. The walls were stone. Uneven. Carved by hand. But what disturbed him most were the markings, symbols etched into the mortar. Circles within circles. Crossed out eyes. Spirals. And names. Dozens of names. Some scratched out. Some repeated. One name appeared again and again, larger each time, Julian Mercer. His throat went dry. As he backed away, he stepped on something soft. A rag doll. Torn, stained, with one glass eye missing. It had been placed carefully in the center of the floor. When he bent to pick it up, he heard something behind him shift in the dark. Not footsteps. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Clothes. Julian turned, and the light from his phone landed on a figure just beyond reach, tall, shrouded, with limbs too long, arms too narrow, fingers dragging the floor. The figure did not move. But the breathing continued. He ran. Back in the entry hall, gasping, he looked over his shoulder, nothing followed. The cellar door had closed. This time, it had locked. The key was gone. Julian didn't sleep that night. Not just because of fear, but because the house wouldn't let him. Every time he closed his eyes, something shifted. Whispered. Shuffled in the walls. At 3:07 a.m., he heard a knock at the window. Not the door. The window. He crept toward it slowly, pulse racing. Through the frost-speckled glass, he saw a figure standing in the mist. A woman. Dressed in black. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, one hand pressed gently to the pane. He didn't move. And neither did she. Not for minutes. Just stood. Watching. And then her hand moved, just one finger. She traced something in the fog of the window. A single word, help. Julian blinked, and she was gone. But the word remained. The next morning, the rooms upstairs had changed. The hallway no longer led where it once had. The bathroom mirror was shattered. And there was a new door at the end of the third-floor corridor. Smaller. Narrow. Made of red wood. It hadn't been there before. Carved into the center was a symbol he recognized from the basement, an open eye, stitched shut. He should have turned away. But he didn't. He opened the red door. Inside was a nursery. Perfectly preserved. Pale blue wallpaper. A rocking horse. A mobile of faded paper moons spinning slowly from the ceiling. And a crib. He stepped closer. The crib was empty. But inside lay a note. In the same ink as the letter that brought him here, she is waiting in the walls. A soft music box began to play. A lullaby. That same lullaby. Julian ran again, through twisting halls that bent the rules of space, past mirrors that no longer reflected correctly, past paintings where the subjects had begun to move. The eyes of the portraits followed him now. One even blinked. In the foyer, he finally screamed. Not from pain. But frustration. Helplessness. What do you want from me? The house did not answer. But from above, in the attic, something began to crawl. He didn't go up. He wouldn't. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the library. Sat in the same chair. Opened the same book. The pages had changed. They now showed him. Walking. Running. Sitting in this very chair. The images shifted as he moved, recording him in real time. And on the last page, there was a drawing of the front door. Open. Julian stared. Was it a clue? A promise? Or a lie? As the second night deepened, he began to understand something. The house was not haunted in the traditional sense. It was alive. And it remembered. It remembered every visitor. Every scream. Every plea. Every name scratched into stone. It was built to trap, to twist, to feed. And now, it had him. For another night, at least. Just one more. Then, the third. Julian didn't remember falling asleep again. But when he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the library. He was in the hallway near the attic door. Only now, it was wide open. The blackness beyond was complete, thick, absorbing, like a mouth. He couldn't see the stairs. He couldn't see the walls. Only a cold wind drifting down and the faintest scent of dust and flowers long dead. And the sound. Not loud. But unmistakable. A lullaby, once more, hummed by a woman's voice. No words. Just the same hypnotic melody he had begun to recognize like the beating of his own heart. He stood at the threshold for a long time, and for the first time since arriving at Wren Hollow, he felt something new. Not just fear. But invitation. As though the house was asking him to come further. To finally understand. He stepped inside. Each stair gave under his weight, but none broke. They just groaned. Long, low, wooden moans. The kind that seemed to echo into the bones of the house. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The attic was bigger than he remembered. Or maybe it had grown. The floor was no longer covered in trunks. Now, there were beds. Tiny, iron-framed cots, dozens of them, lined in perfect rows across the floor. Each one held a doll. The same kind he'd seen before, porcelain faces, tiny, button mouths, painted lashes. All facing the ceiling. All still. Except one. One doll sat upright, perfectly placed at the center of the room. Its head tilted slightly to the side. And it was humming. The same lullaby. Julian froze. His hand clenched the flashlight tighter. The doll's lips didn't move. But the sound came from it. Around it. Inside it. He stepped closer. Its glass eyes rolled up to meet his gaze. Then, the light went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The humming stopped. And for a moment, nothing. Not even breathing. Until he heard footsteps. Not his own. Soft. Bare. Walking across wooden beams. Circling him. One pair. Then another. Then several. Children. Moving all around him in the dark. Then, whispering. Why didn't you come sooner? She's so cold now. You promised. You promised. The flashlight flickered back to life. The attic was empty. No cots. No dolls. No children. Just dust, swirling in the beam like ash. He staggered backward, hitting the wall. A mirror hung there, one he hadn't noticed before. It showed the attic behind him, but not just the attic. Behind him stood the children. Gray. Hollow-eyed. Dozens of them. Watching. Waiting. Julian didn't look back. He bolted down the stairs, nearly falling. He shut the attic door behind him and locked it, though he knew the lock wouldn't matter. Not here. Not in a house that could move its own walls. He needed answers. The third day had begun. And he could feel the weight of it, thick in the air, hanging over every creaking beam and whispering corner. He returned to the library one last time. This time, he searched behind the books. Something had to be hidden. Something real. A record. A clue. At the back of the bottom shelf, behind a row of false spines, he found a metal latch. He pulled it. A section of the wall creaked inward. Behind it, a narrow passage. Stone-lined, damp, curling downward into the foundation. There were candles burning inside. Already lit. As though someone had been waiting. The corridor spiraled deep underground. Julian followed it without speaking, without hesitation. Whatever lay below the house, it was the heart of it. The source. The air grew warmer. Then colder. Then still again. Each turn of the passage felt like shedding a layer of skin. Time didn't follow him down there. The idea of minutes or hours vanished. He finally emerged into a chamber. Circular. Domed ceiling. In the center, a stone altar. Surrounding it, dozens of small chairs. Children's chairs. Empty. On the altar lay a book. Old. Wrapped in cloth. Bound in cracked leather that pulsed faintly under the flashlight beam. He didn't want to open it. But he had come too far. Inside, there were names. Dozens. Hundreds. Some crossed out. Some blurred. Each listed under a heading, the offering. Julian turned the pages. Each entry had a date. And a child's name. And the name of the one who brought them. Then he found it. Mercer, Evelyn. 1897, offered by Julian Mercer. He froze. He didn't have a daughter. Did he? He didn't know an Evelyn. But as he read the name again, something opened in his mind. A memory. Not fully formed. Just a flicker. A child's laugh. A birthday candle. A promise whispered in the dark, "I'll come back for you." Then gone. As if the house had taken it. Or never let him have it in the first place. Julian stumbled back from the altar. The candles had gone out. But the book glowed faintly now. Not with light, but attention. The house knew he'd seen it. And now, it would show him the rest. As he turned, the chamber walls began to shimmer. Images formed, half mirage, half memory. Children lined up at the altar. A woman in black leading them, her face always turned away. Men and women watching, nodding solemnly, as the names were read. As the door above was sealed, he saw himself among them. Older. Then younger. Then older again. Again and again. As if he had always come here. As if he had always brought someone. He tried to run, but the corridor behind him had changed. No longer stairs, but a slope. Downward. Always downward. When he finally burst into the light again, he was no longer in the house. He was in the woods. Fog. Cold. The trees arched above like ribs. And at the base of one massive, gnarled tree stood a figure. The woman in black. Her face, finally visible. It was Evelyn. But not as a child. She was old now. Ancient. Yet unchanged. Eyes black. Hollow. Lips cracked. Still humming. She opened her mouth. And dozens of voices poured out. You left me. You forgot. You promised. He fell to his knees. The fog thickened. The tree opened behind her, hollow, pulsing like a wound. She stepped back into it. Vanished. And Julian followed. Inside was the house again. But upside down. Floor above. Ceiling below. Gravity meaningless. Everything rearranged. Familiar yet wrong. He walked the halls like a ghost. And on every mirror, the same phrase had been etched now: 3 nights are done. You may stay. Or you may return. He stood in the foyer. The door now stood open. Wide. Sunlight beyond. Birdsong. Reality. He approached slowly. Hand on the frame. He could walk out. Right now. No trick. No resistance. But as he stepped forward, something cold slipped into his hand. A child's hand. He looked down. A girl stood beside him. 7. Maybe 8. Dark hair. Familiar eyes. Evelyn. Not ancient. Not hollow. Just a child again. Smiling. She whispered, "You finally remembered." Behind him, the house sighed. Julian stepped outside. Hand in hers. The sunlight felt wrong. Too bright. Too late. The path through the woods was clear now. But as they walked, the shadows twisted behind them. And the house stood, still watching. Still waiting. For the next visitor. Julian didn't speak for a long time. He and the girl, Evelyn, walked the woodland path without words. The sunlight filtering through the trees was too bright, almost artificial, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Even the birdsong felt distant. Mechanical. Repeating. He kept glancing at her, unsure if she was really there. But she held his hand tightly. Warm. Small. Real. They reached the edge of the forest. His car was still there, parked beside the gravel road, just where he left it. The keys were in the ignition. The doors unlocked. No frost. No dust. As though only minutes had passed. He looked back once, toward the path they'd emerged from. But the forest had closed behind them. The entrance was gone. Only trees now. Endless. They drove in silence. Miles passed. Roads familiar. Yet, something about the world felt thinner. Like he was seeing it through glass. A copy of the life he remembered. And Evelyn? She didn't speak. She didn't blink often, either. She just watched the trees as they passed. When he pulled into his driveway, he expected it to feel like a return to safety. A reset. But the house was too still. Too quiet. The porch light flickered once and then went out. He turned to Evelyn. "Do you want to come in?" She looked at him with a faint smile and said, softly, "I already have." That night, Julian didn't sleep. He sat in the living room, staring at the window. The glass kept fogging, then clearing. Fogging, then clearing. Like someone was breathing against it from the outside. Evelyn had gone upstairs. Into the spare room. She didn't ask permission. She simply went. He hadn't seen her since. At 2:16 a.m., he heard the music box. The same lullaby. Coming from the hallway. He stood slowly and stepped into the dark. The music stopped. The hallway was empty. But the rug beneath his feet had changed. The pattern now showed a circle, woven into the threads. A symbol from the house. From Wren Hollow. He stepped back. And in that moment, the living room clock stopped ticking. The next morning, he checked the mirror. Just to see. The reflection looked right. Mostly. But his eyes, only his eyes, had changed. Darker. Slightly wrong in shape. Not tired. But hollow. And when he smiled at himself, his reflection didn't smile back. He poured a cup of coffee. Evelyn appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound calm. She tilted her head. "It's still night," she whispered. He looked out the window. The sky was pale, yes, but the sun hadn't risen. Not fully. And wouldn't. That strange twilight had followed him here. Days passed. Julian tried returning to work. To town. To errands. People greeted him. Spoke to him. But something was off. They didn't seem to recognize him. Even old friends paused a beat too long, as if struggling to place his face. He looked in mirrors wherever he could. Each one showed something slightly different. In one, his pupils were too wide. In another, his mouth didn't move with his voice. At night, he'd find Evelyn standing in the backyard, barefoot on the grass, staring up at the sky. Once, he asked what she was looking for. She replied, "The next house. The next door." One evening, he found the doll. The same ragged one from the basement. Sitting on his kitchen table. "It's one glass I now replaced." And it blinked. He began to dream of the house again. Not as it was, but how it wanted to be. Endless rooms. Spirals of stairs that descended into ink. Children's laughter echoing through empty corridors. Walls that breathed. Sometimes, in the dreams, he was a child. Sometimes, he was the house. On the 7th night, he tried to leave again. He packed a bag. Got into the car. Started the engine. The GPS blinked. No signal. The radio hummed static. And the road didn't go anywhere. He drove for 3 hours. And returned to his own driveway. No turns. No intersections. Just a straight line into a circle. When he stepped inside, Evelyn was at the table. Waiting. "You were supposed to stay," she said gently. "You made a promise." Julian sat across from her. "I don't remember the promise," he whispered. She smiled. "That's why they always break it." That night, the house shifted. Not Wren Hollow. His house. Walls cracked, only faintly. Doors moved slightly to the left. The kitchen window now looked into a hallway that didn't exist. And from the closet under the stairs, came a sound like breathing. Low. Wet. Familiar. He didn't sleep again. He sat in the living room. The light from the hallway dimmed. And from the shadows, Evelyn stepped forward. Older, again. Eyes black. Mouth stitched. Her body flickered, like candlelight. And behind her, the door. The red door. Carved with the shut eye. Just like before. It had followed him here. Julian rose. He walked toward it. Past memories that didn't belong to him. Past echoes of Evelyn's voice. Of children he'd never met. He reached out. Touched the handle. Cold. Familiar. The door opened. And inside was Wren Hollow. Exactly as he left it. The floors groaned. The windows wept. And in the distance, the music box played. Once more. The red door closed behind him. Without a sound. And just like that, Julian was inside again. Wren Hollow greeted him like a long-lost lover. The dust in the air moved like breath. The walls hummed softly, a low resonance that seemed to sync with his pulse. He had forgotten how warm the house was. Not comforting. Just alive. The foyer stretched longer than he remembered. Each step echoed like it had weight. Like it mattered. He didn't call for Evelyn this time. He knew she wouldn't answer. Instead, the house answered for her. The music box started again, faint, distant, mechanical. The same lullaby. Only now, something layered beneath it, a child humming in unison, slightly out of tune. Julian followed it. The living room was unchanged. Dust-coated chairs. The broken clock on the mantel. Firewood neatly stacked but never burned. But the fireplace glowed now. Not with flame, but memory. Inside, he saw flickers, a girl's face, smiling. A candlelit cake. A storm outside. A man, him, kneeling, whispering to her, "I'll come back. I promise." Then the fire died, and the memory turned cold. Julian turned away and stepped into the hallway. The walls had changed again. Covered in frames. Paintings? No. Not quite. They were moving. Like windows into rooms across time. He stopped at one. It showed Evelyn, but much younger than he'd ever seen her. Perhaps 3 years old. Sitting in a small room, drawing circles on the floor. She looked up. And saw him. Her face changed. "You're late," she mouthed. Then the image faded. Julian walked on. The farther he moved, the more the house blurred around him. Doorways stretched. Light shifted. The colors of the wallpaper faded to black and white. Eventually, he came to the staircase. It led upward now, infinitely upward. He began to climb. The stairs wound through strange spaces, a hallway full of shoes, all child-sized, none matching. A room where it rained inside, but only on the ceiling. A kitchen where the kettle screamed endlessly but never boiled. He kept climbing. Eventually, the stairs ended. At the attic door. But this time, it wasn't closed. It was wide open. A soft light pulsed from within. And something inside was singing. Not the lullaby now. Something else. Older. He stepped inside. The attic was no longer filled with cots or dolls. It was a circle of stone now. And at its center was Evelyn. Not as a girl. Not as an old woman. But something in between. She was kneeling beside the same book he had found underground. The one with the names. She looked up and smiled. "Julian," she said. "Do you remember now?" He nodded. Not with words. But with silence. And still, she understood. "You left me here. But not out of cruelty. Out of ignorance." He swallowed. "I didn't know. I forgot." "You chose to forget. That's how the house works. Every offering must forget the door, so they don't come back." "But I did." She nodded. "You always do. That's the curse." Julian stepped forward. "Let me take you out." Her smile dimmed. "I can't leave. I'm part of it now. And so are you." "No," he whispered. "Yes. You brought me here. And because of that, the house welcomed you. It took me, and then it took you too." She reached out, her hand cold but real. You came back this time because there was still a piece of me left. Still a piece of you left. But the house is patient. It will eat that, too. Julian dropped to his knees. He felt the floor throb beneath him, like a heartbeat. The stone pulsed with rhythm. He touched the book again. This time, he saw the final page. It read, Julian Mercer. Returned offering. Cycle complete. Beneath it, a new name began to write itself. Not by pen. By will. By the house. Evelyn Mercer. Freed. He looked up. Evelyn was gone. Only the stone remained. Still warm. And then, silence. The house no longer hummed. The walls no longer wept. The lights no longer flickered. Wren Hollow had gone still. As if satisfied. Julian stood. He walked slowly back down the stairs. The rooms returned to normal. The hallway shortened. The windows showed the woods again, calm and gray. He passed the old mirror. This time, his reflection looked back. But it wasn't him. Not exactly. It was the Julian who had first entered the house. Tired. Grieving. Hopeful. Still dreaming of redemption. Still lying to himself. Julian nodded to the mirror. It did not nod back. The front door was open. He stepped out. Not into daylight. But night. Moonless. Starless. Just fog. Endless. He walked until the house disappeared behind him. And then he sat. On the forest floor. Waiting. He didn't know what for. Perhaps sleep. Perhaps forgetting. Perhaps another visitor. Someone else who would hear the hum of the house. Someone else who would find the book. And write a new name. Somewhere behind him, a music box clicked open. And the lullaby began. One final time.